On today's episode of the Essential Coaching Skills Podcast, we have another episode of What I Learned from Dave. And today's guest is Michael Halbfish. He is not a coach, he is not a hypnotist, he is an attorney. But he learned a lot from Dave, and we want to find out what that is, and we will in just a minute. Stay tuned. You are listening to the Essential Coaching Skills Podcast, a show devoted to uncovering the systems and the secrets that set the best apart, where you learn how to take your coaching clients to the next level, while you grow the coaching practice of your dreams. So sit back and relax, or sit up and get excited. Either way, you might want to pay attention. This could be important. Hello, Mike Halbfish. It's been a long time. How are you, my friend?
I am good. How are you doing? Been a long time.
Long time. So the reason I asked you here, we can chit chat some other time, but the reason I asked you here and what the listeners I hope are mostly interested in is your experience with one Dave Dobson. Now, as I have told the listeners before, I call what I do these days neo-Ericksonian hypnosis because it's not strictly speaking Ericksonian, partially because I learned so much of what I do from Dave Dobson. And yet most people haven't a clue who this guy was. Very, very few people really had the good fortune to attend a fun shop. He didn't like workshops, so he made them fun shops, which were at first 2 weeks long, 10 days, because he took the weekend off. And I did mine, my first one back, I think it was either 86 or 87. When did you first start going to fun shops, and did you do more than one?
I did a 3-day in Connecticut with Dobson around 1991 or so. And then mainly because of your strong recommendation, I was deciding at the time I had so much budgeted for training and so many vacation days, and I was at that decision point. Do I go off and do a trainer's training with Bandler? No, I'm going to Dobson. And you were the decisive factor in making that choice.
And
And
baby, look at you now. Yeah.
that was probably about 2003 or so.
Oh, really? That late? Okay.
Yeah, he was really in bad physical shape at the time. He was on oxygen support, and he
Yeah.
needed to take frequent breaks.
Yeah. Yeah. I visited him. I did a fun shop. I think it was 2004. Might have been his last one actually. And yeah, it was a big challenge for him to get into come down the stairs with the oxygen tube and get on the thing. But so Barbara had already hooked up with him by then. Barbara Stepp was running the show for him pretty much.
When I did the week in Friday Harbor,
Yeah.
she was taking care of him.
Yeah.
The first one was PB or BB before Barbara.
Beefy. Yeah. Right.
BB.
Yeah, good. So tell us about it. What did you learn? What is the thing, I mostly this is like what I learned from Dave is this sort of overall theme. I've had a number of people, most of them so far have been repeat offenders. In other words, that people have gone to more than one fun shop. That was Dave's term, by the way, the repeat offender thing. But I'm assuming you're glad you went, that you did the Dobson thing instead of the Bandler trainers training. What did you learn from Dave? What was it? What was your takeaway?
It's a funny question, and it reminds me of a story.
Hmm.
My favorite Gandhi story. There there used to be long lines of people who would wait to meet Gandhi. And a woman traveled with her 9-year-old son for several days and stood online for something like 10 hours to get a moment with Gandhi. And she got to Gandhi after waiting for like 10 hours. And she said, Gandhi, can you tell my son to stop eating sugar? And Gandhi looks at the boy, looks at her, and then he says, come back in 2 weeks. And 2 weeks later, she goes through the long journey, the long line. She's exhausted. This kid's losing patience. And by this point, I'm sure he was hating Gandhi, ready to hit Gandhi. Gandhi looks at her and he says, come back in 2 weeks. Finally, after making a third trip to this pilgrimage and waiting online again, Gandhi simply looks at the boy and says, what's your name? Ram. Ram? No, Ram. Oh, Ram. Stop eating sugar. And at this point, the woman is furious. I traveled days and days. I came out here 3 times. It was a great expense and great hardship. I waited online all day long. Why, why did I have to go through so much just for you to utter that simple sentence? And Gandhi looked at her and he said, because when you first came to me, I was still eating sugar. And when you first asked me to have this conversation, it had been like 20 years since I had spent a week with Dave. I got immersed in life, and I hadn't really thought about a lot of the teachings. It was kind of at that other than conscious background level.
Mm.
So I started to revisit this stuff, starting with a simple act of observation, the hello pattern, which every student of Dobson learns. First, they learn it through observation, and Dobson just demonstrating it repeatedly without having a label. And then Dobson unpacks it and explains what they've been observing outside their conscious awareness. And I started practicing these patterns and thinking about them and really immersing myself back into the world of Dobson. And I realized something that it took me a couple of decades to realize. Dobson taught this hello pattern, which is a pattern of observing how people with their unconscious mind have a pattern of acknowledging other people and things, an initial response pattern. It's unique to everyone. And by recognizing a person's pattern and playing it back to them, saying hello in a way that's unique and meaningful to them, it's a very powerful means of gaining rapport and showing respect to their non-conscious mind and saying to the person, you're safe with me. I'll respect you. And that's what we learned at the time of the fun shop. Revisiting it, I realized something more. Dobson was kind of like in the movie Karate Kid, there's a famous scene where the young boy is told by the karate master to brush a fence and polish a car. And he's doing this for hours and hours and hours without realizing that he's learning the basic movements to block the punches and the kicks as he's being taught these things. What Dobson was teaching us to do through creating this habit was become a very keen observer of people right from the very moment they enter our realm, where we can observe and interact with them. It was that initial contact point. Dobson had a gift for finding easy entrance points, access points, leverage points, and doing very subtle things that would change a directory or an entire trajectory. If
Can I
if we change it, yes.
just kind of ask you if you have any particular stories about Dobson doing that rather than other stories about Gandhi, which is a great story, by the way. And do you have any stories about like how did he do that to you? I have a story about when he first did that hello to me thing. What was it like for you when you first were with him and he was, finding your directory and changing your trajectory? What was it like for you when he did those things?
Classic Dobson story. Dobson was hard of hearing. He had a hearing aid, which back in the day he was deaf in one ear, and he had a wire that went under his beard to the other ear, and he would lean in and he would pretend not to properly hear a person's name to get them to repeat it. And he would really calibrate to their unique way of saying their name. Everyone has their own way of saying their name. And where the emphasis is, for example, if it's a two-syllable name, how they do the vowels, if they leave off a consonant at the end. Everyone has their own pattern. And he would make a particular effort to say people's names in their own special way. The other thing he did as he was doing this is by playing with mispronouncing it and properly pronouncing it, he'd calibrate how do people indicate yes, how do people indicate no. And that was a major part of Dobson's training, just getting very clear yes no signals. A classic way that people would often do it is they'd set up finger signals, lift one finger for yes, the other finger for no. Dobson would recognize everyone has their own way of communicating yes and their own way of communicating no. And once he understands that, he doesn't need the verbal yes or no. One of the things we learned from Dobson is people are going to respond automatically and unconsciously first. And if there's an inconsistency, that's the most reliable response.
Well, I'm sorry, if there's an inconsistency where?
Like if someone's saying yes and they're shaking their head no, believe that head shaking. Or if they're saying no and their head's going like this,
Trust the other than conscious rather than the conscious communication.
yes.
Got it. Yes, got it. Good. So those of you who are just listening to this podcast, Michael was shaking his head no while saying yes before, and nodding his head yes while saying no before. So there's an incongruity between the physical signaling of shaking or nodding the head and the verbal speaking of the yes or the no. So if you have a conflict, if there's a yes, verbal yes, but a shaking head no, then Dobson said trust the shaking of the head. Is that pretty accurate?
Spot on.
Okay, cool.
And that's just a real simple sample. We communicate with our non-conscious minds constantly in all sorts of ways.
Mm,
And that's just one of the most universally recognized, easy to understand ways of doing it.
right.
A congruent communication would be if the person is shaking their head up and down yes while saying yes.
Mm-hmm. Right. Right.
And you might hear it through other channels also, like if a person verbally said yes, it, to
Right.
most people it probably wouldn't sound like an enthusiastic true yes.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Right. So there's subtleties within that. It's verbal yes and a nod, but it could be a difference between a nod that also has a little facial expression of like this bothers me a little bit, right? There might be a little look of consternation on the face while they're saying yes, even though they're saying yes and their head is nodding yes. It's maybe not 100%. There's a part of them might be feeling kind of bad about it, which is why the face shows that consternation.
Exactly. And these are skills we all have at some level and people all do.
Yes.
Dobson just takes it to a level that's far beyond what people normally and typically do and he gets other people more aware and doing that. And that hello pattern is one of the entryways to doing that,
Yeah.
because it gets people in a habit right from the get-go. The second you notice someone, you're paying keen attention to them, observing them, noticing their patterns. And Dobson's pattern recognition skills and his ability to teach pattern recognition is extraordinary. People have patterns and habits that are unique to them, and we become more aware of it with his training.
Hmm. Yeah. So very good. Now you are not a hypnotist. I mean, technically, officially.
Not as a career,
Yeah,
not
not
as a
as a career.
career.
As a career. So you are an attorney, if I'm,
Yes.
yeah. So why did you bother going all the way up to Friday Harbor, Washington to sit with this guy in his living room for, well, how long was your fun shop? Was it, it wasn't 10 days at the time. 5 days?
It was 5 or 7 days, something like that.
Uh-huh.
It was largely your recommendation and mutual friend Jeff Thaw.
Oh,
And
oh, wow.
yeah, I haven't heard that name in years, I bet.
Many, many, many years, many, many, many years. Yeah. So that's
Jeff,
interesting. I didn't even know he knew of Dobson. Honestly, I didn't know that he was involved. But why did you? I mean, recommendations aside, why did you decide to say yes? I'm going to do this. What did you want from Dobson?
I wanted to become a masterful communicator,
Okay.
and that was one of the big goals. And I thought I would develop influence skills that would help me as an attorney. I was young in my career at the time, and I learned all sorts of skills from Dobson, and those influence skills are probably among the least used things that I learned from Dobson. Not that I was disappointed there,
Hmm.
but as my career moved along, I uh, I really don't work in a way where I need to influence people, at least not with verbal communication and the nonverbal and the stuff that Dobson does.
You're not a
A lot
court,
of a lot of my work is done with paper,
right? You're not a
and
courtroom trial attorney,
it's not his medium.
right?
It's not the way Dobson communicates.
No, Dobson is
But
very much an other than conscious communicator. So, yeah, so you were not a trial attorney, so you were doing mostly on paper, and so those kinds of subtleties that he was talking about weren't translatable.
I I'm actually I do consumer protection and class actions, complex litigation, where a lot of it is done with paper, and the cases just never go to trial, even
Hmm.
though people would label me as a trial lawyer.
I gotcha. Yeah,
And
understood.
my particular skill set, I do things on paper.
Okay,
That's where I'm best.
understood. Do you have to do depositions? Do you interview people and that sort of thing?
I do, and Dobson's observation skills are enormously useful in that context.
Yeah, I would imagine. Yeah.
One of the things that Jeff Thaw said to me is Dobson's really teaching people how to trust their other than conscious mind.
Hmm.
What most people would say unconscious or subconscious, Dobson referred to as other than conscious. And Dobson had a masterful way of doing that. When I was in Friday Harbor, we had a bunch of chairs that were set up in a room in his home, and he was teaching from that room. And there were no tables or anything like that, so we would all set our coffee cups down on the floor. And at one point, I got up physically, spun around, and my coffee cup had been sitting on the floor, and it was about that close to my heel. And I perfectly spun around with no awareness that my coffee cup was there without knocking it over. And Dave looked at me and he said, "You did that brilliantly." And I was completely clueless as to what he was talking about. Now, there were two people who had trained a lot with Dave who were next to me who immediately realized what Dave was referring to. Dave had this amazing ability to utilize anything that happened. He observed and he realized that while consciously I had kind of forgotten about that coffee cup, there was an awareness at another level that enabled me to maneuver through the world. And and by pointing it out, he's pointing out how we can rely upon that part of our brain, trust it, and it will guide us. And after training with Dobson, there's a trust in that non-conscious aspect where I could kind of just set an intent or direction. And just like when we drive down a road and we automatically turn, I know once I set the destination, it happens. And I think that experience happens for a lot of Dobson students where they develop a congruency and alignment between their conscious and unconscious that enables them to achieve outcomes.
Gotcha. So let me ask you a question. Dobson was far and away the best hypnotist that I've worked with personally. In other words, his way of doing hypnosis was extraordinary, and you know, I just remember being in the room with him. If he started doing that special way of talking that he did, it was like, good night, you know, I'm out of here. It was this no way of doing it. What do you think was so special about him as far as his ability to do hypnosis is concerned? What set him apart in your mind?
He was a very keen observer of people,
Hmm.
and he would utilize everything, just like he utilized that one moment when I spun around.
Okay.
He Dobson loved jokes, he loved stories and humor, and people knew that, and they expected to have fun with him. And as a result, their guard was down and they were in a receptive state, as opposed to when you hear the stereotypical description of hypnosis, and it terrifies a lot of people that they're thinking that someone's going to have control over them rather than just a friend having a good time and respecting them. And the there was a receptive level that was just we're having fun, we're playing, and in that state, people learn quickly. And one of the things that I think Dobson had an awareness of is a lot of the times the problems and challenges people had were unconscious or other than conscious.
Other than conscious, yeah.
And other than conscious challenges are best resolved at other than conscious levels very often where they're operating.
Yeah. Makes
And and he would meet people at that level and connect at that level, just like he demonstrated the hello pattern and we had the experience before he told people and gave a bunch of verbal words to it so that we could later describe it,
yeah.
where have some sense of what we were taught.
Very nice. Yes. Did you when you did the fun shop, did you have a English camp experience? Did he send you off to English camp?
No, I didn't have that experience. At least I don't remember doing English camp.
There was Dave Dobson lived, just for the listeners who don't know this, lived in Friday Harbor, Washington, which is a harbor on the island of San Juan, the San Juan Island, north of Seattle, between Seattle and Vancouver, the San Juan Archipelago. And so Friday Harbor at the time, I think if I remember correctly, was they said it was about the equal size in mass to Manhattan Island, but had more cows on it than it did humans. The only way to get there was by boat or by airplane. And so they had more per capita pilots on that island than anywhere else in the country. Um, English camp was on the far reaches of it, and it was literally a camp for the British back, I guess, prior to the um, uh, uh, American War of Independence, although I'm not sure exactly the years of English camp, but it was an outpost. It was like a fort that they had that was fortified at one point, but then it wasn't anymore. But it's now just a public camp, a public park. And so he would send us there. First few years, at least, as his workshops became, his fun shops became shorter and his health became less robust. Um, I obviously took that out of his fun shop itinerary. But nevertheless, what happened with us was he would do a kind of trance induction with a group where we did an age regression, and it was a great little induction. It wasn't as deep as like the beach trip or other inductions that he did, but it was fun, and it had you float up out of your body, and you're floating up by the ceiling, and then so these little different changes that would take place. But finally, he did this age regression when you're just a kid, and all you wanted to do was play and explore, and there was no worries about things. It was just about fun and playing and exploring. And then he sent us off. He rented a bus, and we just got on the school bus as kids and went off to English camp, and we're supposed to play for an hour or two, and it was fun. We climbed trees and skipped stones and on the water, and it was just everybody who was like full-grown adults pretending or acting as if or feeling like they actually were, 7 years old again. It was really, really nice little learning experience. A lot of times in hypnosis, it seems like people do that, age regression, early learning set, as they call it in Ericksonian hypnosis, early learning set to open you up to what we did as kids, which was to explore and learn like sponges, just absorb new patterns, let go of old patterns and grow into new patterns, which was a lot of the thing. So yeah, it was a fun thing. Dave had a lot of wonderful hypnotic experiences. I remember when he died, Barbara asked Richard Bandler for a quote, for basically a little memorial, and he said he was the best hypnotist I ever met. And that's a guy who worked with Erickson a lot, but Dave was the best hypnotist that Richard Bandler ever met, as far as that quote was concerned. So that's pretty good. Yes, that's not too bad.
When I first trained with Dave, I thought, this was probably what it was like being in the room with Milton Erickson.
Mm,
Bunch of people sitting around listening to stories, and these stories were so multi-layered with meaning and communication that was happening on so many different levels, verbally and non-verbally.
yeah,
And a lot of it conveyed with humor and metaphor and experientially.
yeah, it was pretty extraordinary. So the first time was that you're referring to your workshop in Connecticut, or the first fun shop that you did in Friday Harbor?
Both of them were somewhat like that. It
Yeah.
was very early on in Connecticut. I was thinking this is probably a lot like what it was like being with Erickson.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. First time I ever heard him, he was at a Tony Robbins NLP certification course, my practitioner level certification course. He was a special guest speaker. And it was just so absurd. Tony Robbins is this young guy. He's like, yes, live with passion. And everything is vital. Move, go, 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 go. Super high tech, super, not high tech, but high visual. And then Dave comes out he wasn't smoking, but my memory of him is that he's walking on the stage with a cigarette because he smoked like a chimney. But I don't think he was actually smoking. But my memory is he walks out smoking a cigarette, and he wasn't that fat, but compared to Tony, he was definitely, low key and kind of with that beard. He looked somewhat like Santa Claus, you know. And he starts talking real slow, and Tony's like, I don't know, but it's just the opposite of Tony Robbins. And, he starts telling these stories and they're funny, but he takes his time telling the story. There's absolutely no rushing this guy. He's going to take all the time he needs to tell his story and get to that punchline. It'll be there soon. Don't worry. It's coming. It's on its way, but he wasn't going to hurry. And it was amazing because there were, it seemed like a huge crowd. Tony Robbins's crowds have gotten legitimately huge over the over the years, but it seemed awfully big to me to have like 300 people in the room. There were 300 people in the room, and I looked around, and I really liked this guy. I was really enthralled by him, but I looked around, and most of the people in the room were asleep. They were just like asleep. And I thought, oh, these people are so rude. So rude. But then I realized eventually it got through my noggin that they weren't actually sleeping. They were just in a trance. That he had managed to like trance out the whole room through his storytelling in that particular manner. I was really, and that's one of the reasons I said, okay, I gotta figure out what this guy's doing here. And I signed up for my next fun, well, the next fun shop he offered. It was really amazing experience. But very different, by the way, being in his living room with 25 people as opposed to being in a seminar room with 300 people. But he didn't change that much, honestly. He did the same kind of thing, told stories, but they were perhaps a lot more accompanied by subtle references using that other than conscious yes. That he picked up how you say yes. So when he wanted to, give a particular direction to you, he'd have that anchor of your yes and that he could do in a room of 25 people. Obviously, you couldn't do that in a room of 300 or so.
One of the other things that he did was he made us aware of our own internal yes and no signals.
Oh, tell us more about that.
During my training in Friday Harbor, he had us set up finger signals for ourselves, for other signals, where we we could kind of become aware of. It was like a amplification and a greater awareness of when we have a yes or a no from our other than conscious. So it's not just about recognizing other people's yes and no's, it's also recognizing your own.
Yeah,
Like if you're deciding something and you're not sure, it's a useful tool.
that makes, yeah. So do you still use that one? I mean, do you get like a sense of it, or do you get a finger signal? How's it come across for you?
With me, it comes across in my feet
In your feet?
and in my feet, and I use it, and I've been using it more since you asked me to do this podcast with you because it got me, or consciously using it because it got me revisiting a lot of this stuff. A lot of this stuff is very automated for me now. It's kind of like riding a bike.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the challenges of coming up to this podcast, and one of the reasons that I postponed it, is because a lot of Dobson stuff also got blended with a lot of the other NLP trainings that I did. And I want to think, to cleanly describe Dobson, what was uniquely Dobson
Mm-hmm.
as opposed to what's an amalgamation or fusion of Dobson and Bandler and you and all these other people who influenced how I do some similar things.
Yeah.
And a lot of this stuff is very automated. Like one of the things that Dobson taught is a very simple cue for a trance-like state where we simply roll our eyes up slightly.
Mm-hmm.
It's something you could do in an instant with your eyes open or closed, and most people will never detect it. But it's a way of doing something unique that cues you in. And Dobson would find a lot of those unique ways of simple things that are subtle of doing things. And at some point in time, this became so instantaneous for me that I, I can just say, okay, this is what I want to accomplish. Take take that quick access, and the shift at the other unconscious alignment or whatever I need is in place. It's all automated.
Yeah,
It's also something we do it naturally when we're sleeping to
right.
some extent.
Right, the rapid eye movement sort of thing is your eyes are closed. Yeah, the way I learned it from that I remember learning is that it wasn't optional whether your eyes are open or closed. It was close your eyes, and then with your eyes closed, roll your eyes up, which is a very unusual thing to do. You might look up, from time to time if if your eyes are open and there's something you want to see at the ceiling, you might roll your eyes up to see what's up there. But it's rare to close your eyes first and then roll your eyes up towards the ceiling. So it becomes a unique stimulus that says to your unconscious mind or other than conscious mind, here we go now. We're going to use hypnosis for positive outcomes.
Dobson would refine things down to the simplest essence. He had a very famous recording called the beach tape,
Hmm.
which was a kind of hypnotic journey that he would take people on to a beach. And one of the ways he suggested that people use it is write out a goal you're working on and write it out maybe 1 or 2 pages in detail. Then condense it down to a page, then a paragraph, then a sentence, then a word or a symbol. And things would keep getting condensed and simpler and simpler. And Dobson had a gift for doing that. He's also training us to do that. So at some point, all these things take on that automation that I've been describing, where I could just think of something, eyes go up for a moment, and it's like I'm on autopilot heading toward that desired outcome.
Right. Cool. Yeah, awesome. One of the first persons that I know that went to a fun shop, because literally when I met Dave at the Tony Robbins thing I was talking about, I didn't know he did fun shops. First person I know who went to one, Mark Thomas. I don't know if you remember Mark Thomas, who worked for Tony Robbins.
I don't think I knew him.
He said that, I don't know what he did. I think I was in trance for 2 weeks. I don't know what happened. But I just know that everything's working better since I have come home. You know, all, all my
It's a
systems.
very good description
Yeah,
for probably most attendees.
yeah, I think so. I think so. So a lot of times Dave wasn't really focused so much on teaching the techniques that he was doing or whatever, but he was working on people while he was there, working on helping you to be congruent. And I think that is one of the differences. When I did a Tony Robbins Date with Destiny one time, one of the ways that people were trying to install new patterns and a new hierarchy of values, install the new hierarchy, is were supposed to say in front of their group as congruently as possible, I know that I breathe, I embody, passion or whatever their values are. And they'd have this ritualistic sentence. I don't remember what it was, but it was something like, I now hear, see, feel, and know that I am passion. And they had to say it with conviction, with congruence. And for most people at a Tony Robbins thing, that meant yell it as loud as you can, you know. But Dave isn't about yelling. Dave is about true congruence or congruence, which is that all of your systems are saying, yes, I do see and hear and feel and know that I am passion. And you say it with this level of all of your systems saying yes, right? That real congruence is there. And I think that was one of the things that for me really separated Dave from everybody else. He was really looking for that conscious and other than conscious congruence in a human being, and that's what he was aiming his participants in his fun shops to walk away with, whether or not they knew consciously what it was and could, describe what happened at the event. He wanted people to walk away with that congruence.
Regarding that, one of the things that Dave did with us is he used the illustration of a three-legged stool,
Yes, the famous
where
tool.
one leg represents the visual,
Mm-hmm.
second, auditory, and the third, feelings, and the concept of balancing it all. And I remember a friend of mine. Did you know Tom Shimo?
Oh God, I know
Tom,
the name. I'm not
Tom
picturing.
trained quite a bit with Dave, and
Tom.
after learning about this stool, Tom told me he would deliberately decide today's going to be a visual day, today's going to be an auditory day,
Mm,
today's going to be a kinesthetic day.
right.
And he would rotate through on an ongoing basis to become skilled and adept at using particular sensory modalities in his thinking, his communicating, and his processes.
Hmm.
And it's also a way of expanding his own flexibility.
Yeah.
As we go through using the channels that we might not ordinarily use, we get different results and different patterns. There's a popular saying in the NLP world, and to some extent outside it too. If you want something different, you got to do something different. The same thinking creates the same results.
Right.
And Dave would break people out of their habitual modes of thinking. Another simple thing that Dave taught is you can go into the different eye accessing patterns that represent the different submodalities, like the visual, the auditory, deliberately taking yourself there and thinking about a situation, a challenge, something you want to learn or master, solve, or whatever in each of those channels. And then you can start bouncing around like a pinball in random ways, as if there really is any random way, ways that may be different than what you ordinarily do.
Mm-hmm.
And going through in different patterns is going to alter the thought processes and create new ideas and new learnings. And he he did something similar with a diagram which back when Dave was using it wasn't as well known. Now it's very commonplace knowledge. There's a nine dots, almost
Mm-hmm.
like a tic-tac-toe pattern,
Right.
and people are challenged to draw this diagram where they got to think outside the box to
Right.
do it in within the constraint of the rules
Right.
for the challenge. And in some ways, that's like the different eye positions. And you take on new patterns. There were a lot of meanings with the nine dots, from thinking outside the box to literally connecting the dots
Right.
to becoming aware of how we approach a challenge, being able to change and adapt our thinking, or even go for it. There are people that are afraid to even put the pen down because they're such perfectionists and they put pressure on themselves. They're not comfortable with failure as part of learning before they can succeed. And Dave could both help us become aware of our own patterns by giving us a challenge, and he becomes aware, seeing how we're going about it.
That's really good. No, I remember that was a fun thing. And I also remember my surprise when I read Bill O'Hanlon's book on Ericksonian hypnosis, Taproots, that one of the chapters in it had that same nine dot diagram in there. Apparently, Erickson did that too. I thought, well, that's cool. There's another parallel between, Dave and Erickson. When I first met Dave, I thought I was learning Ericksonian hypnosis. I thought he was teaching Ericksonian hypnosis, and it took me a while to figure out. Well, I guess I figured it out after he told me um, that he wasn't doing Ericksonian hypnosis, but he had met Erickson once. I've got a picture of them together, but he was only like the weekend in Connecticut for you. It was a very small, short thing that he attended, that Dave attended of Erickson's. Um, but yeah, he didn't do Ericksonian hypnosis. He did other than conscious communication, and there's lots of parallels between the two, ways of working.
even their hearing,
Yeah, right, right, exactly. Yeah,
and
Dave
to
did
some
this.
extent, lack of mobility in Dave's later years.
Yeah, true. That's true. That's true. So yeah, boy, it was quite a time, wasn't it? So glad that you had the opportunity, that you listened to the excellent advice that I gave all those years
Thank
ago.
you.
Yeah, you're welcome to go out there to Friday Harbor and be with them. Did you ever manage to get to a Richard Bandler trainer's training as well?
I've gone out to Bandler a number of times.
But not the trainer's
I,
training.
no, I've gone out and I've done portions of different trainers' trainings. I've never done the trainers' training straight through from start to finish, but I've been to a couple of his trainers' trainings with just a couple of days in.
Good. I'm glad you got to do both. It makes me
Thank
feel,
you.
yeah. So, Michael, I think we're about done with our time here today. I really, really appreciate your taking the time to tell us about some of your experiences with Dave and some of your learnings from him. Is there anything else you want to add before we say, bye for now?
Uh, I made notes before. I'm gonna just
Check your notes.
give a quick look through. I was thinking of some of the things he did with us and some of the big emphasis. Uh, One of the classic NLP patterns that people will learn in practitioners is pattern interrupt. And a lot of what Dave did was masterful pattern interrupt utilization.
Absolutely.
He he had a gift for recognizing patterns and just brilliantly utilizing that.
And
Very
doing it
first
with
note
humor.
I have is I listened to some of the other Dobson conversations that you've had, and I don't think anyone mentioned he would call his work at times fail-safe hypnosis, which is a little bit of a phonological ambiguity with feel safe.
Hmm. Hmm.
And Dave would zero in on having the absence of fear as being a big part of what enables people. That and the wisdom to, with fear and other emotions, to have appropriate levels and appropriate context, where it's more like a sliding scale light switch than an on-off light switch.
Hmm. Yeah.
I think that ability to choose the emotion and emotional intensity level was one of the great things that he would teach in 100 different ways. And another important lesson from him is we're the gatekeepers for both the messages we send ourselves and the messages that we allow others to send that influence us.
Mm-hmm.
And people say things all the time, both good and bad, without realizing how it affects people at other than conscious levels. And we got to be selective as to what messages and from who we choose to take in.
Love it.
Uh, choose good suggestions.
Yeah.
Uh,
And I think, frankly, that
Another,
that was one of the reasons he taught us that eye roll pattern. Because not only did, he said this, my memory of it is that he told us when he taught us the eye roll to close your eyes and roll your eyes up towards the top of your head, that this is kind of like having an ignition switch for your brain, similar to having a unique key for your car that only you can start your car. This is like only you can do this thing. I can't reach over and roll your eyes up for you. Nobody else can. You're the only one who can roll your eyes up behind your closed eyelids. So it's a unique signal to you from your conscious mind to your other than conscious mind that says, okay, now we can be open to suggestions. Now we can be open to positive, alternatives and useful ideas that are coming your way through hypnosis, whatever other means. But until then, you keep the filters up, and you say, yeah, this is good for me. This isn't good for me. You just can have those filters up and you stay safe. I like that. Fail safe, feel safe. That was good.
he had a gift for finding unique way and simple ways of communicating at those other than conscious levels,
Yeah, you sure.
like for yes and no's with anchoring for people who have some NLP background or know what that is. He would encourage people to just give a subtle look to one ear for yes, the other ear for no with your eyes.
Mhm.
Something that on a conscious level, people probably aren't going to pick up on. But over time, it it works. And it's something that eventually, just like these other skills, it's like learning to ride a bike.
Yeah,
People consciously struggle with it, and then after a while, it just becomes an automated, easy process.
yeah, yeah.
And a lot of Dave's training, I think, was designed to simply set us up with things that can really generalize. Like when I learned the hello pattern, that was a generalization to all observation. And it was a key leverage point, a key entry point, right when the interaction begins. What better point to start observing and recognizing patterns?
For sure.
And a lot of what Dave did was recognize those leverage points and access points and just subtle ways of just nudging something in the right direction. And I could go on for hours about this stuff, as can you, but I think we're probably at a good point to wrap this up.
All right, Michael Halbfish. Thank you again so very much for doing this. If out of curiosity, if anybody wanted to get hold of you, do you have a website or anything like that? No.
No, I'm a bit like Dave, the curmudgeon. I try to stay underground.
All
I
right.
almost never find photos of me or video. You're one of the only people in the world that I do something like this for, and I for the most part try to stay off the radar. I'm a Luddite in this high tech world.
All right. Well, thank you for making the exception and being here with us. And I kind of guessed that after it took us a half an hour to figure out how to get you onto the Zoom call, but we made it. We did it. There you are. Funny because we had to do it first. Your PC didn't work, and then the iPad didn't work, and now finally you were recording this from your phone. But at least that worked, and we appreciate your being here, Michael.
Yeah, I'm also not doing this from my home or office network today since I'm on the road. So
Uh-huh.
uh, it may have been the network, but we got it going.
Good. Well, once again, thank you so much.
My pleasure. Thank you for inviting me.
This has been the Essential Coaching Skills Podcast. Thank you for being here. It's a pleasure seeing you again. Hope to see you again real soon. Come back next week when we have another gripping and exciting episode of the Essential Coaching Skills Podcast. And if you want to, you can find out more about us, each and every one of us, at essentialcoachingskills.com. Thanks.